We're at Torcastle on a meander of the River Leven, and here this meander cuts across the very core of the Great Glen Fault. So you can see that there are these fins of rock which are running like this. So running like that, they're perhaps 2 to 3 or maybe 4 meters high, up to 10 or 20 meters long, and they're only 1 or 2 meters wide. And between them there's much lower ground that seems to cut round between the fins. And this is the core of the fault. And to understand it, we need to remember a few things about the Great Glen Fault. So remember, it's a strike-slip fault, and last week we talked about the displacement on it of perhaps 100 kilometers or substantially more than that. And because it's a strike-slip fault, that means the fault plane is vertical. And I talk about that in the 1 minute plus the 3 types of fault, so you can follow the link to see that video. But because the fault plane is vertical, it means that the size of any particular rupture is limited to the thickness of the brittle part of the crust. So that's perhaps 20 kilometers or so. And when you have a rupture which is limited to that size, then it means that the magnitude of the earthquakes that are generated on it are limited to, let's say, less than magnitude 7. And that means that the displacement of any particular earthquake is only going to be maybe a few meters. So if you have 100 kilometers of displacement on the fault, which is generated by earthquakes which are only moving any particular rupture by 3 or 4 meters, that means you've got tens of thousands of earthquakes that are needed to accommodate that 100 kilometers. So when you have tens of thousands of earthquakes, they're not all going to happen on the same plane. You know, big faults are not just a simple fault plane, because you've got all of these ruptures happening. They might move, they might hit an asperity, a hardness, or find a soft area in different ways each time. They might nucleate at different places. You end up with lots and lots of overlapping fault planes. Pretty much every earthquake generates a new small fault plane. And that's what the soft ground is in between here. This is basically made up of all of the overlapping fault planes. So the hard rock is less deformed than the soft rock in the middle, and it's actually a different composition as well. So if you have 100 kilometers of displacement on your fault, that fault is going to be experiencing lots and lots of different rocks on the way. And those rocks end up getting incorporated within the fault zone, within the rupture zone. And this happens at all sorts of scales. If we look at the regional geology map, we can see slivers of old red sandstone which are tens of kilometers long, which are incorporated within the Great Glen Fault, where you don't have old red sandstone on either side of it. So you get really large things, and then you get these things at the few meters, tens of meters scale as well. The soft stuff is the stuff that deforms, and that then gets incorporated in here. And if we look down into these zones, what we can see is down in the deformed, worn away zones is very mica rich. So it's a mica schist, whereas these much harder things, they tend to be much more sandy, and these are metasamites, so metamorphosed sandstones, so much more resistant to deformation. So you get this, and this is called a fault melange. It's a really nice example of it. If we look at modern ones, they look exactly the same. So here's an example from the Beatix in the southern Spain of an active fault plane, and there the different rock types that the fault plane has incorporated have different colors, so we can see the beautiful blocks of more resistant rock which are separated by this mixture, melange of much softer stuff anastomosing around those blocks.